They say become comfortable with being uncomfortable. But what do you do when that becomes your baseline? When you think of being humbled, what is the first thing that comes to mind? Is it someone being loud and proud and being proved wrong? Is it someone that's too overconfident for their own good? Well, what about when you need to humble yourself? Now, that's scary if you've been avoiding challenge. But on the other hand, it can be empowering to realize you know so little. Because now the pressure to be perfect doesn't exist. You know you can make mistakes, and being humbled doesn't have to be about ego anymore. There's a point where you realize that hard work beats talent, and you've probably realized that already. But some of you aren't ready to be humbled. What this means is that you're not ready to be challenged about what you believe within yourself. Do you really believe you're the person you think you are? And what happens is you work so hard, you keep working harder and harder and harder, and you're in this cycle of unfulfillment because you keep just chasing the next thing. You try to level up by putting in more effort. But the issue is, if you lack humility, you'll also get in the way of your own potential. Because being a beginner is where the growth actually lies. It's accepting the position of a beginner when it comes to your studying. You've been studying your whole life, but if someone tells you, this is how I do things, maybe you're not willing to let go of your own routine, maybe for one day, for 1 hour, just to see what it's like to start all over again. And that's stopping you from reaching your potential. When I was in school, I developed this quiet complacency. And I say quiet because it wasn't boisterous, it wasn't condescending in how I approached people. It was really in how I pushed myself as a person. I created this trap around myself, which meant I was upholding a reputation I didn't build for myself. Instead of me practicing from a point of devotion, it was from a place of fear, in case my identity didn't align with what people thought of me. One thing you will realize is that if you are becoming the smartest in the room, or you are the smartest in the room, you're only as good as the next person. Because no one is challenging you, no one is actually showing you this is how you can improve, this is another perspective you should value. You end up just falling to the level of the people around you. And that is why it's so important to focus on who is around you within your inner circle. And when things are going well, it's very easy to become confident and overconfident eventually, to a point where you start to dismiss other perspectives. But when things are going well, that's when you should actually be taking on these perspectives in order to sustain your growth. Because if someone is telling you, this is how you can improve, let's say you're getting the results you still wanted to get, you want to maintain that momentum. You don't want to slow down, get yourself into a rut, and then bounce back and start thinking of how I can improve. If you're continuously improving, there's no reason for you to stop and drop to ground zero. So let me ask you a question. Are you protecting an identity you didn't choose? I know it's very tough to look within yourself when it comes to being a hard worker, because if you pride yourself on that, when you take that away, who are you? What kind of person are you? Are you really the person you think you are? And that takes some introspection and some honest reflection. As I got older, I started to reframe the word smart to mean academically able, because education was the only context at the time that I would use the word smart, or other people would use the word smart. Outside of an education setting, the best definition I've heard is knowing how to get what you want. That is what you call a smart person. Now, in a way, if you're calling someone smart, you're kind of humbling yourself because you're showing appreciation for something you don't have or an ability you don't have. But in my case, while I was being called smart, it was a projection of a fixed mindset of essentially being born smart or not having to work too hard and therefore it comes easy to you. So as a result of that, that's kind of the stem of the quiet complacency I developed. It created a fear in every action I took. And as a result, if I did something new, it felt like jumping off a cliff. It was like you've built this massive mountain and now you're about to jump into something that's gonna discredit your reputation. And that's what happens. That's what happens when you're not the one humbling yourself and you're just playing up to an identity that isn't really yours. When I was writing that reflection in this script that I'm doing for this video, I thought to myself, if you're proving somebody wrong, you're probably doing something right. If you're proving everybody right, you're probably doing something wrong. And that's because you're playing it too safe. And deeper than that, you are contending with an expectation of you and not really going for what you truly want. That causes an internal conflict and that unfulfillment that you feel when you keep working harder and harder and harder. I only really started to grow as a person when I struggled under my own accord. Whether that's in the gym, whether that's studying alone, it's pushing yourself to a point where you are challenging yourself and your own beliefs and questioning whether you know what you really know. And as a result of that, that's when you learn about yourself the most, because no one's telling you do this or else. There's no threat of consequence. It's simply an experiment to see what happens. And then you learn about yourself. When you're using the same words, you're seeing the same demographics, you're seeing the same activities, same people, etc. Sure, if you work super hard, you're gonna thrive relative to that environment. But there comes a point where, let's assume you're the smartest in the room, you're gonna stunt your growth because your ambitions are only as high as what you've seen. You can only aspire to be what you've seen. And by being in the same environment, mentally and physically, the space for growth is limited. With that comes the need to experiment. How do you experiment? How do you try new things? My life is too busy, it's too rigid. I can't make time for this thing that I don't know if it's going to amount to anything. You start saying poetry to make excuses. Well, I'll give you two answers. I'll give you an easy answer and a tough answer. We're gonna go with the easy answer first. The easy answer is integrate this experiment, right? Integrate it in your day-to-day life. Read 10 pages a day. Have you heard of that before? You probably have, but you still haven't done it. I haven't done it either. I'm with you, so you're not alone. Okay, let's go into the tough answer. The tough answer is get over yourself. If you know it takes work to become the person you want to become, why haven't you done the work yet? Does it matter enough to you? Because if it does, then you're telling me you're procrastinating. Do you have a reference point from your past that tells you that this step forward isn't as scary or as steep as you make it seem? Because if you do, that's really, really important. You need to realize that the person between you and your potential is just yourself. Action comes before confidence. There needs to be some sort of inclination some incentive, some reason that you have to connect with before you try something new. Otherwise, it's aimless. It's cool if you go to this event, if you go to the gym for the first time, if you study using the Pomodoro technique, like, cool. But if there's no intention behind it, you might as well just not do anything. But let's just point out the obvious, right? We are humans. And with that comes our tendency to want simple explanations and simple solutions. And in the search for that, we like straightforward concepts, personas, avatars of different people in order to make our way through life. But let's be real, that's fine, because if you're trying to challenge your beliefs about everything in your life, it's going to become really, really tiring, exhausting for that fact. But at the same time, you control what you challenge about yourself. Just because someone says to you, you need to do this, doesn't mean you're going to do it. But you see what your issue is. It's also kind of my issue, it's kind of everyone's issue. We keep trying to cover our back. We keep trying to not embarrass ourselves. When I was talking about acting from a place of fear and that limiting my growth, that is exactly what's happening today. The price of experimenting and trying something new is embarrassment, whether that's private or if it's public. But again, you need to get over yourself. You need to get out of your own head. And because you're acting from this place of fear, you're doing the intuitive thing instead of using your intuition. The intuitive thing is doing what everyone else would do in that situation, or you think they should do in that situation, and then doing it. Instead of listening to your intuition, which is telling you, maybe this isn't right. Maybe I should just do it the way I used to do it with a little tweak. But you don't listen to it. And as a result, you blend into the median. You get the same results as everyone else. And that's not your mission. You want to stand out. You want to be different. You want to be significant in some way. But you're doing the same thing as everyone else. Like, what? Doesn't make sense. I'll give you an example. So this looks like cramming study material in one day and absolutely decimating your ability to study the next day. Why do you do this? Well, it's honorable. If you tell someone, oh, I studied 10 hours today, they'll be like, wow, you work super hard. I'm trying to be like you. Are you? I mean, that's what you think, but are you? And then what happens is, you do it from this position of honor. You want validation within yourself. And as a result of that, you harm your ability to humble yourself. You're feeding this insecurity within you, and you're not growing. And you do this because you think the person who works the most must be the person who wants it the most. But what you don't realize is that your studying is the tip of the iceberg. If your nutrition isn't right, if your sleep isn't right, if your health isn't right, you're setting yourself up. It ends up being, I'm sick on exam day. After all the work you've done, you end up missing the exam because everything underneath wasn't stable. And it takes humbling yourself. It takes going back to basics. How many times has someone said, oh, you need to go to bed early, you need to sleep more, you need to rest more, you need to eat better. And you're just like, yeah, I'll do it. And then you're looking for complex solutions to your very simple problems. But why don't you invest in yourself? The reason you don't invest in yourself is because you're scared of looking foolish. In your head, it's a trade-off. You're trading off doing the work for the less important work, the work that's invisible, doesn't really have a clear outcome or a clear time and date as to when this will come into fruition. And you end up just destabilizing your path. It's like building stairs and the bottom of the stairs is unstable, but you're trying to build across. It's gonna fall over eventually. So it's sooner rather than later. Because if you have this unsustainable habit of not sleeping longer than 5 hours a day, for example, in 10 years' time, there's gonna come a point where you have to force yourself to prioritize that for your own health. And you realize, I've just been delaying the groundwork, the stuff that actually is gonna hold up this foundation. So when you're defending suboptimal solutions or systems, it's fear manifesting itself as hustle. It's fear manifesting itself as hustle. For insecurity, that feeling of not being enough, that's where you're working from. That's where you get your fuel. And it's nice in the start, it works, but in the long term, it's not gonna work, right? Because the circumstances will change. And if it's not devotion that's pushing you forward, and it's the negative energy, you're gonna burn out eventually. So now, your uncomfortable of the past is now you're comfortable of the present. You now have a baseline that is based on what you used to do that wasn't as comfortable, but you keep trying to stretch the limits, trying to prove to yourself that to my old version, I do better than them. I do more work than them. But all you're doing is holding yourself back. You're avoiding the humbling of yourself. So let's reiterate these points and summarize. Action breeds confidence. That's the first thing. When it comes to humbling yourself, it doesn't have to be dramatic or embarrassing. It's simply acknowledging that you might not be the person you thought you were. And most of the time, that is something that happens in private. Nobody notices it. It's something that gives you a newfound belief, a new energy to step into the person you want to be. And the gap between you and future you is not as wide as you actually think it is if you start today. And finally, it's about taking agency of your own potential instead of letting history define it for you. History is letting the same old story happen again. There's been so many stories, and you've probably seen it so many times. The amount of people that fall into temptation, that give in to their old insecurities. And the same old story happens where they don't really fulfill their potential. They don't go to where they want to go. And you're trying to be different. You're trying to not only prove to yourself that it's possible, but you really want this outcome that you're working towards. If you made it to the end of this video, comment 100% and a key takeaway you got from this video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.